So I hope it became clear why we must not return an error. Still, the question, of course, is we're creating new observables here in catch error in map. What should be inside of these observables? Well, keep in mind that I said that you typically want to dispatch a new action once you're done with the code in your effect. So what should be in here is your new action. You don't need to call dispatch because that's also partly done by add effect here. Your entire chain's result here will automatically be treated as an action by NGRX effects and therefore will be dispatched. So here you just need to return or add an action object and NGRX effects will automatically dispatch it for you. And that means that here we can of course create a new action. Now we have no action for the error case. So for now, let's simply try avoid this and not create any errors until we add proper error handling. For now, I'll just return an empty observable. Here in map, however, we can return a real observable. And of course here, I want to return an observable that holds my login action. So not the login start action, but the login action. Because now at this point of time, I have a successfully logged in user, and I want to reflect this in my application by reaching that login reducer code. And for that, we need to dispatch that login action. Hence, here in auth effects, we're already importing auth actions. So down here, let's create a new auth actions login object. Now there we need to feed in an object with the email, password, and so on. In auth service, this is all data we forwarded here to handle authentication since we got it from REST data. And in handle authentication, we then did some additional things like calculating the expiration date. In the end, I'll just copy that calculation here, like this, go to the auth effects, and now do this here in map data. REST data holds all the data I need. For example, in REST data, I find the expires in key. TypeScript is just complaining here because map here will, by the way, also execute after catch error since we don't return an error anymore but a normal observable. Hence, we should switch order here. Then map will be skipped in case of an error and catch error will kick in. But when catch error executes, map will not run again. And now I also need to convert this to a number by adding a plus here to avoid errors. So now we're calculating the expiration date. And now here to log in, we pass in the email, which we get from REST data. There is an email property. We need to pass in the user ID, which we also get from REST data. There it's that local ID key. We need to pass in the token, which we also find in REST data. It's the ID token property. And expiration date is our expiration date constant we just worked on. So now I'm returning this new action here, and this, as I said, automatically gets dispatched by add NGRX effects. Okay, so that was a lot of talking. Let's ignore the error case for now and signing up and so on. Let's now make sure that we take advantage of our effect here for logging in. And for that, we have to wire everything up now. To wire our effects up, first of all, we have to go to auth effects here to our class and add injectable here, like this. Add injectable, or the injectable decorator, needs to be imported from add Angular core, and it is required here not to provide this in root, so don't add this. It will never be injected itself, so it doesn't need to be provided. But it needs add injectable so that things can be injected into this class. And we are injecting actions and the HTTP client. Otherwise, we would get errors. So add injectable is needed here so that things can be injected into auth effects. Now, for registering all the effects in this effects logic globally, we have to go back to the app module where we also registered our store module. And after registering our store module, we now register, well, you probably can guess it, an effects module, which we get from add NGRX effects. Now that effects module here also has a for root method, like this. And to for root, you now have to pass an array of your root effects. That means of your effect classes. And here that is the auth effects class, which you therefore also need to import auth effects imported from the auth folder, from the store folder, and from the auth effects file. So we're registering this class here as a class that holds effects. We're forwarding it, or we're passing it to effects module, and ngrx effects does the rest and sets this all up. The missing piece for us now is to dispatch a login action. Now we have our login start action, we have it here in auth actions, and therefore all we have to do is we have to go to the place where we do call login on the auth service, and that is our auth component. Here in onSubmit, I have my observable for logging in or for signing up. And now here, when we do log in, I don't want to use the same logic as before. Instead here, I now want to use my store. So let's inject store of type store. As always, store is imported from @ngrx/store. It's a generic type, and therefore it needs information about how our app state looks like. So let's import everything as from app from our app reducer. And here we then have from app state. And now when we do log in here, let's comment out this old code, and let's instead use this store and call dispatch. And now we just need access to our auth actions as well. So time for another import. Import everything as from, and not as from, but as auth actions from the store folder in the auth folder, and there from the auth actions file. And with that imported, we dispatch a new auth action, which is login start here. Now that needs two pieces of information in an object. It needs the email, which we have as a constant here, and it needs the password, which we also have as a constant. So let's forward email and password here. And with that, this gets dispatched. Now, one important side note, dispatch here does not give us an observable, which is why I can't store this in auth ops. This also means we're not notified about once this is done, this login process, and hence resetting loading and navigating away won't work for the moment. We'll have to check the network tab for whether this whole login process in theory works correctly, and thereafter we'll have to find out how we get information like, are we still loading, out of our store. So for the moment, let's still test it like this though. Let's save everything, and let's go back to our application, log out, and let's try logging in. Now, as I said, this here simply fails, and that is to be expected because we haven't updated all the code. But let's check the network tab here for requests that left our application. And there indeed we see verify password. We did send a request to this path, and that indeed is the login path, and we got a 200 response back. And indeed in the preview we see we got success data here. So the login request was sent, and it also looks like it generally succeeded. However, the rest of this application is not really working. It basically broke down. We have an error, and therefore it's now broken. Our app is broken. That, of course, simply is related to the fact that here in our auth component, we are trying to subscribe to auth ops, and that is simply not set in the login mode. It's still undefined here because here I'm not setting it anymore because dispatch doesn't return an observable to which I could set it. Instead, we'll have to find a different solution for being notified about whether we're currently waiting for a response or whether we were successful or if we have an error.